Hello everybody, welcome to episode 8 of making an online Pokemon game in GameMaker Studio 2. In this episode we need to do two things. First we need to deal with disconnecting our sockets, our players, and second we need to deal with movement. So if I run the server and I run a couple clients here, we can see the players appearing in both screens, but if I close one down, they don't disappear out of the screen. So we'll deal with that real quick. That should take a few minutes, and then we'll get some basic movement going. The disconnecting thing should be relatively simple. All we need to do is, well, we can start with the player data, I guess, or the player controller actually. The player controller, we'll just write a function to remove a player. So we'll say remove player is a function, and this just needs the socket ID of that player. And I'm going to, all I have to do is say players socket ID equals no one. That's all I have to do. But I'm going to add in a little conditional here just to make sure that this socket ID isn't out of bounds. So this shouldn't happen, but just in case, I will do an if player, I could write a function for this. Yeah, let's do that. Verify socket equals a function socket ID. And here I'm just going to do if socket ID is less than 0 or socket ID is greater than or equal to network.maxClients. I'm going to say, first I'm going to do a debug.error socket ID plus string socket ID plus again is out of bounds. And then I'm going to return true, and otherwise I will return false. So what this is doing is it's checking if that socket ID is either below 0 or above the allotted size. And if it is outside of that range, it's going to log an error message and return true. Otherwise it'll return false. I know it sounds like it should be returning false here and then returning true here, but the reason I'm doing this is just so I can say in the remove player, if verify socket ID, did I spell this correct? Verify socket, oh, that is spelled wrong. Okay, verify there. Okay, that should be correct. Then I'm just going to return. So if we verified it and it's returning true, we'll return. I'm going to copy that line of code and add that into the make player as well. And this will deal with the logging that error itself, so I don't have to do anything with that here. It's just if we verified it and it returns true, exit out of this. Otherwise set it to nothing, and that should be fine here too. All right. So now we actually have to find a place to call this remove player, and there's two places to call that. Once in the server and once in the client. So the server needs to remove the player and the client needs to remove the player. So if we go to the server code here, we have this network type disconnect here in the onAsync function. And so here is where we want to remove from the server. So right here is where we're removing the socket, but now we need to remove the player. So all I have to do here is say player controller dot remove player, and the ID is just I. So that's that done in the server, and now we need to do it in the client as well. The way we do it in the client is the server right here has to tell the client who to remove. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say network.start. We'll create a new ID here, a new packet type. We'll call it an remove player, and I actually already have one apparently, or I don't. Maybe not. So I did have to rewrite this code. Like I redid this video twice now, so I had to undo a lot of code. So hopefully there's no changes. I deleted the code that I did so I could start the video over. So I was a little worried. So yeah, I don't have that ID. I did remove that, but apparently autocorrect still recognized it. But yeah, so under network types, we should create that macro and remove player. We'll set that equal to 3. And then back under the server, this should be showing correctly. So network.write, and we'll just write in the ID. We don't need any more information. So this will be a buffer signed 16, and we'll just pass in I for the index, and network.send all and the sockets. So we're going to send it to every single player and tell everybody, hey, we are removing a player, and which player we're removing, index I, and send it to everybody. I don't need to do any exclusions here because this socket's already removed, so we don't need to like exclude or anything. We could put I there, but we don't really need to. Gosh, another cough. Still getting over that cold, which is not good. Don't know why it's lasting so long. Anyway, let's continue on. So we have send all to the sockets. Now the client actually has to deal with receiving that data, which happens in the onData client. So in the onData client, we need to handle this packet type. So case n remove player. So if we receive a removal of the player, what do we want to do? We want to say player. Well, let's get the ID first. So ID equals network.read, and it's a buffer S16. And then I will say player controller.remove. Sorry, remove player, and we're going to remove that ID. And that should be everything we need. If I run this now, hopefully we get no errors, though I doubt it. I'm sure we'll get some errors. So I add 2, we'll add a third one, and if I close one of these guys down, just like that, they are actually being removed. So I can run it again. We'll do 2 this time, and if I close down this guy, the yellow one should disappear on the other screen, and yep, everything seems to be working just fine. So like I said, that was very easy, only took a few minutes. So now let's get some basic movement done. So we're getting 2 things done in one video, which is great, because I'm not going to leave this video at only 7 minutes. So how do we do this? Well, as I said before, we need to control who is handling the movement, the server or the client. And it's easier to program in the client, but it also means that if you give too much control to the client, they can do some notorious or bad things. They could be a bad actor, and if they have full control, they could say, hey, I know I was in this location at one point, but the very next frame I'm actually 1,000 pixels away, way over here, and the server is just going to accept it and be like, okay, I guess you're over here now, and then it'll tell all the other clients, yep, this guy here, I know he was over there, but now he's way over here, and everyone's just going to accept it. And that's what happens when you have the client handle movement or information in general versus the server. With the server, the client is going to tell the server, instead of this is where I am, the client will tell the server, this is my intent. I intend to move left. I intend to move right. Instead of saying this is where I am, this is saying what I want to do. And the server will be like, okay, this is what you're doing. I'm going to update your position and tell everybody, okay, this is this guy's new position. So let's deal with that now. We're going to be doing a kind of rough estimate of how this is going to work. This isn't going to be perfect Pokemon movement. We're just going to get something working, some form of movement. So it's going to look a little weird, but it'll be better later. It's going to be a little inefficient too. So don't worry about the inefficiencies right now. We'll fix it up later. So how are we going to do this? Let's go to the network types and let's create some new network packets. So we'll create one for, we need to do one for key press and key release. So key press, we'll make it 4, and key release will be 5. And I think there's one more that I need. Yep, we'll do a key and player position. And we'll just do pose. Nope. We'll just do pose like that. And this one's going to be the server telling all the clients this is where I am. I'm going to make a break here because this is going to be dealing with all the movement. Just so we know. This will be a little different later, I'm sure. But for now, this should work. So if we go to player data, the player data, we need two functions here. One, and these are update functions, and one is going to be updating for the server, and one is going to be updating for the client, because they're going to update the player data in slightly different ways. The client's going to handle it by essentially telling the server, this is what I want to do, this is my intent, and the server is going to actually be handling the movement itself. So we'll say update client is a function, and then update for the server is a function. Whoops, there we go. So if we're a client, we do one thing, and if we're a server, we do another thing. So how are we going to do this? Well, I can say something along the lines of, we need to keep track of all of the key presses. So var keys equals an array. So these are all the keys that we can press, all the keys we want to track. So I'm going to do WASD for now, and I'll copy and paste these for WASD, and let's iterate over these. So for var I equals 0, I is less than, this is array length keys, I++. So this is going to allow us to iterate over this array of keys. And now I can say if keyboard check pressed VK, or not VK, just keys I. So if we press that key, what do we want to do? And then I'm going to do the same thing, but instead we're going to do keyboard check released keys I. So if we press the key, do one thing. If we release the key, do another thing. Question is, what do we want to do? Well, since this is updating for the client, we want to tell the client, this is what I want to do. So how are we going to do this? We will start by saying network.start. So we're going to start a packet. This is going to be the N key press type, and it's going to be network.write. So now we should write in what key we are pressing. So I will go into here and I will say, and we're going to be passing in the key itself instead of like the letter or anything. So this, I believe, is a number from 0 to 255. So I should be able to do a buffer unsigned 8, and then that should be fine. And I'll do keys I. So we're going to tell the server what key we are pressing, and then let's actually send it. And I don't have a function for this, but we want to create a function for sending to the server. Because we aren't specifying a specific packet, we just want to be able to send it to the server itself. Every other send function happens on the server, so you do have to specify the packet, but in this case, I just want to specify that we're just sending it from the client to the server. So let's write that function. So if I go to the network, you can do control middle mouse click to open that up. On the side, we have the send and send all. I'm going to copy this send and paste it, and we're going to create one for send server, and we don't need any parameters. And for the socket, we need to specify that it's the client dot socket, and that is fine. I honestly thought that was going to come up with an error because the socket would be wrong, but I guess not. I guess that's working just fine. If I come to the client, let me just double check something. Yep. I feel like this should be not no one but undefined. So under the client, I'm just going to change socket from being defaulted to no one to being set to undefined. And that should be fine. Hopefully that doesn't break anything, but it shouldn't. So if I come back to the client, I think, actually, where were we? Client on data client. Is this where we want to be? No, we want to be on the server. Open up the server. Yeah, so let's go to the server, and I'm going to go to on data server and control middle mouse click this now. hope I'm in the right place. I hope I'm doing the right thing. Okay, we'll be fine. So yeah, so on data server here, we are going to handle what happens when we receive those 2 bits of data. So the first one was the case of N key press, and the second one is N key release. So what happens when we press the key and what happens when we release it? So we need to update that player to actually be pressing the key. So let's go to the player data and add these in as functions, or as variables I should say. So I'll come into here, and the player needs to know if it's pressing the left key, so we'll set that to 0, the right key is 0, up key is 0, and the down key is 0. So by default they'll all be 0. And then if I come back to the on data server here, we could set those up, set them to 1. So how are we going to do this? We need to say, first get the ID. So I'm going to say var underscore ID. And I will say ID equals, and we need to do a network.read. And we have this as a buffer U16. And actually, no, that's wrong. I need a key. We don't pass in the ID for this one, do we? We just pass in the key. So I'll say underscore key is buffer read. And this is not a U16, it's a unsigned 8. A U8. So this is the key that we are trying to press. If we want the ID, that is just equal to network.header.socket ID. So now we have the key and the ID of who sent this message. Yeah, because we don't need to send the ID because that's already sent by default from the client to the server. So now I can do something along the lines of player controller dot, and let's verify the socket first of all. So we'll say if player controller verify, and this is the ID, then we can just return. And then I can say something along the lines of var p equals player controller dot players ID. So we're going to get that player object, and I'm going to say if p equals no one, then I'm just going to return, because that means that we're trying to update a player that doesn't exist. Otherwise, I can say p dot position dot, or not p dot position, p dot, and we need to update that left, right, up, and down variables. So I'll say switch on key, and case or DW break. We can set p dot, and let's do this a different way actually. Make this a little cleaner. I'll say if key equals ORDW, then p dot up equals 1. And let me put a couple tabs there, and I'm going to copy and paste this 4 times. So if we are pressing the W key, set up to 1. If we are pressing the A key, S key, and D key, this should be left, down, and right. So up, left, down, right, WASD. Make sure those are aligned. And that should be everything. And now I'm going to take all of this, copy it, and paste it under key release. And all you have to change here is, instead of setting it to 1, we're going to set these to 0. As simple as that. Hopefully that didn't confuse you guys too much. We're essentially checking to see if we press the key or release the key. If we press it, we are getting the key, getting the ID, verifying that the player actually exists as an object, and then updating the appropriate variable based on what key was pressed. And it's a little dirty way of doing this, but for now it is fine. So now we need to go back to the player data, because I think I forgot to add in a release here. Yep, so we have key press, we just need to add key release. So I'm going to copy everything in this pressed, paste it down here, and all I have to do is change this from press to release. And that should be everything there. And now under the server what we need to do is take these variables here and update our physical position based on those variables. So let's say var dx equals, and here we can do, I believe it's right minus left, and for var dy we'll say that is equal to, what would that be, up minus down, I believe? Or maybe that's wrong, maybe it should be down minus up. I always get them confused because in different languages it can be different, so we'll just do that for now. If it's wrong, it's wrong. I think the bottom left is 0, 0, right? So it should be up and down. I don't remember which one GameMaker was. We'll find out in a minute here if we're going backwards. If you know, you can just flip it the correct way. But then we can define a speed variable. So we'll just set speed to 5 for now. That should be fine. And here I'll say if delta x doesn't equal 0 or delta y doesn't equal 0, I will set the player's position and get it. But first we need to get the player. So var, well, no we don't. We are the player. So that's actually fine. Alright, so what we need to do here is say if either of them are not 0, I'm going to say position.x plus equals delta x times speed, and position.y plus equals delta y times speed. That should be fine. And now since we are the server, this means we are moving, so we need to tell every single player to update our position. And it's fine to do here because only the server will be running any of this code. So I will say simply network.start, and we call this n position, player position, right there. So update their position, and then network.write. And we need to write 3 things. In this case, because we are the server, we do need to provide the ID. So this is going to be a buffer assigned 16. Man, I should really make that a variable somewhere static, some macro. For now, it's fine though. Anyway, so we do that, and then we need to provide the ID, which is just the ID that we have right here. And scroll back down. Then we need to provide the x and y position. So network.write buffer, and this one's an unsigned, or no, this one's signed as well, and this is a 32. Position.x, copy that, and we'll do position.y, and then we'll say network.send all to server.sockets. And that should be fine. So we are going to write out all of the sockets, or write the new player's position to all of the sockets, is what I meant to say. And that should be everything. I guess we should actually call these functions now, because we're never calling update server or client. Under the client, though, I would like to say that we shouldn't update any player that's not actually us. So I guess I could do that here just by saying, well, no, we'll do it under the controller. So under object network controller, let's add event, and we'll add a step event. And this is where we'll call the actual functions. So under here, I can say something along the lines of if is client, we'll do something. And if we're the server, we'll do something else. So if we're the client, we need to call the update function, but only on our own player, not on every player. So I will say var ID. So which ID are we looking for? And that is the client.id. And then I can say player data dot, or player controller dot players ID dot update client. Update client, is that the name? Yeah, that should be right. Otherwise, if we're the server, we want to call update server, but we want to call out everyone. So we'll do for var I equals 0, I is less than player let's get this in a variable. So var players equals this. Copy and paste that. So we'll do array length of players, then I++. So we're going to iterate through all of those players. And this is wrong. We don't need that, just this. So player controller.players, iterate through all of the players, and if players I equals no one, we can continue. Otherwise, players I dot update server. Sorry, had another cough. Still getting over that cold. Anyway, we update the server for every single player within the array, which should work out just fine, I believe. I mean, if we run it now, let's just see what happens. I'm probably missing something. I have a strong feeling I forgot something. Yep, okay, so out of range. I thought we handled that, but apparently not. Under, where's this happening at? Object network controller, step event line 5. Right here. Okay, so yeah, we never verified it right here. Which I suppose makes sense because we're probably calling this before we actually receive it. So what does ID even equal at this point? So if client.id equals undefined, I think, return. And actually, I don't know if that's undefined. I think we set this to no one. We could do an OR statement, but that should be fine if we do this. So run the server, run the client. All right, there we go. So with one player, can we move? The answer is no. No movement is happening. If I have two players, at least we aren't getting any breaking. Nothing is broken yet. Nothing crashed, so we're good there. Question just becomes, why aren't we moving at all? So let's trace through this. So we're under the player. We should be calling this. So we do this, keyboard pressed I. We should send to the server. I can test this by going into the on data server. When I receive, oh, you know what? Actually, go to on data client. This is what I'm missing. I never actually update the position. We need to actually check to see what happens when we update the position. So player position break. This is under the on data client, by the way. So we need to actually say what happens when we receive this packet. We're sending the packet. We're telling the clients this is the new position of the player, but the client isn't doing anything with that information. So player, so now we need to update it. So player controller, actually before that, let's read this. So what does this give us? This gives us the ID of who is being updated. So network dot read buffer S16. And it also gives us the X and Y position of where they should be. Network dot read buffer, and this is an S30 or unsigned, signed 32, and Y is a network dot read buffer S32. And you know what? I'm really getting sick of this. Let me go to the network types here. And at the very top, I'm going to create some macros. And we're going to call it type in all caps underscore. And we'll do ID. And we'll set that to equal to buffer U16. Or sign 16. See, this is why I need this. Macro type. And we'll do a position to be a buffer signed 32. Now, why am I doing this? This is so that I can use these instead of trying to memorize all of these. So let's do that. Let's go back into the on data client. And now anytime we see buffer S16 for reading the ID, I'm going to replace it with type ID. And I will just do that everywhere where I'm setting this underscore ID. So instead of S16, we're just replacing with type ID. And anytime we're trying to get an X and a Y position, that'll be a type type position like this. And anywhere I see this in the future, I will replace it. I'm not going to go through everything right now. We'll just do it as we go. But yeah, now instead, whenever I deal with an ID or position, because we use those so often, I can just do this and it'll be consistent everywhere. Anyway, so now we have the X and Y position and the ID. Now we need to actually update it. So let's get the player. So we'll go VRP equals network controller. Whoa. That's not correct. The player controller. Player controller dot players. And then we'll do brackets underscore ID. And we'll say if P equals no one, we'll return otherwise. And we can do a break instead. I don't think it really matters if we do a break or a return within a switch statement, but we'll just keep it at break, I guess. So if the player doesn't exist, obviously don't update anything. Otherwise, we'll say P dot, one sec. We'll say P dot position dot X equals X, and P dot position dot Y equals Y. And now we're actually updating the position. So hopefully now, if I run the server and the client, it'll move. So if I have just one player, well, the answer is no. WASD does not work. Even with two players, obviously not working. So that's fun. So that means we're probably not receiving this ever. So let's trace through this again and see what's going on here. So I will go into my player data and check, just make sure that everything at surface level looks correct. Here we're setting a U8, which is the key, the keys, and key press and release. Make sure this server on data server, you are in fact receiving it. You are. And I guess under the key press, let's see that we're actually receiving any key presses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do debug.log string key, just to make sure that we're actually receiving this data. So let's run this really quick. And if I press any numbers or letters, as you can see, we are receiving the data, but we're not handling it properly, which could mean that something here is obviously wrong. It's not debugging any errors, so this is actually fine. Under here, we are saying player, if P equals none, return. That should be fine. All right, so let's go to the player player data and make sure that the server's code is actually running. I can do this by saying something along the lines of debug.log updated position. And now let's try this, make sure this is working. This is a lot of debugging, is just printing out messages and seeing what happens. And the answer is no, nothing is happening there, which could mean that we're not actually updating, calling this update server. Let me move this outside and see if this actually runs, which it's not ever. So yeah, there's our issue. Let's go to the object network controller. Under the step event, for some reason this is never being called. Oh wait, hold on. Let me run it with a player. If I execute a player, okay, still nothing, still not updating. So for some reason it's never getting to here, which is a bit of a problem, obviously. So let me just look through this. So if client ID equals no one, oh, you know what? This client ID is no one if we're the server. So let me move that up here instead. So if we're the client and the client ID is no one, return. Don't do it up here though. All right, now run the server. Now run the client. And if I move, everything is moving properly. Of course, my up and down is inverted because I was wrong. And if I execute another client, I can move the red guy and he moves on both screens. And if I come over to here, I can move the green yellow guy and he moves on both screens. So both people are seeing the exact same position. And no matter what the lag is on the client side or the server side, their positions will always maintain to be the exact same no matter how many players there are, because it's all centralized. The position is based on what the server says it is. So if the server lags, it'll show it for everybody. It won't have some weirdness where one player will look different on one screen than the other, because it's based on what the server says, not what each individual client says. So yeah, everything looks pretty good. Obviously, we should quickly fix that inversion of the movement. So if I come into the player data here, scroll down to, yep, right here where update the server, this really should have been down minus up. My bad. Like I said, it's been a while since I've worked in GameMaker. But yeah, that is everything for this video. I'm not quite sure what to work on next. Maybe we will clean up the movement code. Since we're on the subject of movement, we should fix it up and make it work more like a Pokemon game rather than just direct movement. But if you want to steer clear and not do a Pokemon game and you're just trying to make a server game, then this is a good place to go, like a good place to start, because that's some pretty good movement right there. But otherwise, other than that, I will see you guys next time.